And welcome all of you to today's webinar about recommended file formats. We want to present to you today two projects that share a similar goal, and we collaborate on this in our newly established OPF file format group. Yes. My name is Asbjørn Skødt. I'm from the Danish National Archives, and I share the stage today with Sam Alloing from the National Library of the Netherlands and Marjolein Steeman, Sound and Vision, from both are part of the Dutch Digital Heritage Network. And we, the three of us, alongside a group of other participants, are part of a new group that is called OPF ICRFF. It's not the best name as such. It's a quite large abbreviation, right? And maybe this is something we're going to discuss in the future, how we're going to name ourselves. But for now, we have this newly established interest group, which is part of OPF, where we discuss about file formats and collaborate on this. So today I will briefly talk a bit more about the OPF file format group. Then I'll present a comparison table for recommended file formats. The Dutch Digital Heritage Network will present their guide to preferred file formats, and at the end we'll take questions. And this new group that we have established in the spring, we have participants from institutions all over the world, and anyone is welcome to join us. It is an official part of Open Preservation Foundation, and here we discuss and we share knowledge about issues that are related to file formats. We tend to have monthly meetings. We do want to have specific meetings if we are going to deal with some specific issue, but for now we have monthly meetings. And I want to give a big shout out to Georgia and Helena and the other people at OPF who are supporting us in this and facilitating and coordinating our opportunity as it is to work together. So I want to tell about this comparison table that is our first deliverable. We wrote a news article about this in the spring and asked all of you to share your file format recommendations with us. And we've also recently sent out another news article about it, because we have established this new OPF community research, which compares and collates knowledge on submission file formats that are in use by different preservation institutions around the world. The data has been submitted by OPF member organizations, or we have gone to the different websites of the institutions where we have found the openly published policies. The first draft of this comparison was created by staff at the National Archives of Estonia and the Danish National Archives. And the aim of the comparison is to inspire organizations that are getting started with or planning to renew their file format policies to find information about what their peers are doing out there in the world. And another aim is also to enable engagement in how we discuss about file formats. I want to give a big disclaimer though, and that is our comparison is not supposed to be used alone as a policy. So if you in your own organization wants to find out what are your recommended file formats, then we recommend you to use an analytical framework. Several already exist, or you can also develop your own. We, in my own organization, have developed our own analytical framework. And as part of this, we wanted to have some criteria that were related to what are other archival institutions doing. So that was our motivation for initially creating this resource. But I want to reiterate that this is in no way a file format recommendation that we are giving with this resource. And for us to make this comparison, we needed to find some kind of metric. And we've come up with this file format scoring system, which goes from preferred, which equals to a numerical value. All of them are given a numerical value equals 2. Then we have an acceptable file format equals 1. Acceptable for imminent transfer, it's equals a 0. Then an unacceptable file format is -1. And then if we can't find any information from that organization on that specific file format, we leave it blank. We don't give it any value. Or it could also be that your organization is simply not collecting this kind of information. For instance, my organization don't collect web records, web archives. We, in our country, we have a different institution who has that obligation. So we have a division of labor, so to say. So for our organization, those values would be null. But one issue to raise here is that, in essence, that equates to a 0. And how do you properly balance that? Because a 0 is also acceptable for imminent transfer. There's some of those considerations that we are still trying to work on, how to improve on this. And many organizations out there in the world are using their own kind of labels for how to order file formats, how to recommend a file format. Some say we have preferred and acceptable. Others say we have only acceptable and only unacceptable. And some say we have only acceptable for imminent transfer, basically saying we will accept any kind of file format. So there's many different ways of doing it. And our way of doing this here is only something we created to enable the comparison. And now I want to give you a few examples of how we are working with the file format scoring. The first example is, and here you're seeing a screenshot from the spreadsheet, this data that we've made or registered in a spreadsheet. And the specific example is the use of spreadsheet file formats for submission to national and federal archives. I've highlighted in red what the total score is for the file formats on the left side. One thing, so I don't want to make a big analysis of what these numbers mean. I think that should be up to the individual user of the spreadsheet, the individual institution, to make their own conclusions. But I do want to highlight that based on these scores, you can see 3 different kind of tiers or groupings of the file formats. You can see that there's a top tier, the highest values, a mid tier, and a low tier. And these scores, it is also very important to iterate to emphasize that they don't equate to saying anything about whether this is a good file format for digital preservation. It simply says that this is a popular file format, and in this context among national and federal archives for the purpose of digital archiving. So it says something about popularity. If we look at the top file formats for spreadsheets, then we see CSV and open document spreadsheets. Then there's the mid-tier of file formats is XML, XLSX, transitional, and PDFA. And then there's a low popularity tier, which is XLS, XLSX, strict, PDF, and TIFF. And I want to show you another example. This example here is scientific file formats in use by scientific repositories. We also want to encourage science libraries and repositories to forward us their recommended file formats. I've also highlighted here what I want to say from this screenshot, which is that it is difficult for us to find data points from science libraries and repositories. There's a lot of blank values, as you can see. So we are very much interested in collaborating further with science libraries and encourage them to send in their recommended file format policies to us, so we can improve on this overview here. Then I want to show you my third example, which is audio file formats in use in heritage institutions. So we still have the National and Federal Archives. Then we also have columns or groupings for regional and municipal archives and national and federal libraries. We don't have so many of those, as you can see, on board as we have with the archives. And once again, I encourage you to send in your information to us so we can include them in the comparison. I've highlighted the total score once again. I think this is very interesting data what you have, and there's a large room for making different analytical points. And I want to refrain from that, as I said earlier, because you should make up your own conclusions. But once again, I want to say that you can see there is a top tier, a mid tier, and a low tier for the file formats. If we look at the top tier, that includes BWF, MP3, WAVE with LPCM encoding, and FLAC. Then we have the mid tier, which is AAC, AIFF, and MP4. And then we have the low tier, which is MKA, OGG, Opus, WMA, and WAVE with PCM encoding. Before continuing to the next slide, I think that there's one, and I would say this is a speculative point, because you should make your own analysis, but there's something to, when you look at these data, you need to be aware of. I would not necessarily call it a bias, but it's some kind of inertia, meaning that when an organization defines their file format policies, they need to update them continuously, making sure that they're up to date, right? But you might set up some internal workflows for how to process data. And this can mean that your institution might have a tendency to keep and stick with some file format policies, even though newer file formats are created. And I'm not sure if this is valid. This is purely speculative, but I think that there's room for thinking more about if these total scores, if there's a certain kind of bias towards like older, well-established file formats and then newer file formats, meaning just like the value might take time to improve. Let's go to the next slide. Also, for context, we made a sheet that we call digital preservation strategies, because it's very important. These values that you see on the other slides, they are very much defined by what strategy the organization has. So if they want to make data manipulation at the ingest phase before submission, or if you want to do it very, very late, so you basically do it when you absolutely have to migrate your data, that can influence what kind of values you actually, or which file formats that you recommend. So we encourage you to also look at this sheet so you can understand the proper context for that organization. What are they actually planning? Yes, and that brings me to this late autumn update of our comparison table. This year we define as a kind of hypercare period. We do that because we send out the first draft of this in the spring, and then we want to make sure that we have as much awareness for this new comparison table. So, and we want to make sure that we have as many institutions on board and as updated values as possible. So recently, you might have noticed we sent out another news article about updating your values. And that is part of this hypercare period, which we will finish by the end of November. And then we intend to make yearly updates once a year. But that is also something we will be discussing in our file format group. And then to how do you send in your file format recommendations? We have a manual process for that. And even though there's 4 points, a lot of text here, it can be told more easily, which is that you can go to the Google Sheet, make a copy or download it as a physical copy on your computer, and then you go and you go through the different sheets. When you find your organization, you update the values. If you don't find your organization, you add a new column and then add your information. When you've done that, then you either link to the copy that you made or make an attachment to your email, and then send this to info@openpreservation.org. And in summary, I once again want to invite all of you to join our new file format group. You are all very much welcome. And I also encourage you to visit the comparison table. You can find it on the OPF website. Oi, a bit too fast. And then we also encourage you to send in your institution's file format recommendations. And then, yes, I'll hand it over to Sam and Marjolein. Now it's your turn.
Thank you, Asbjørn. So, yes, parallel to the really nice work that Asbjørn just talked about, within the Dutch community, we were working hard on creating a special tool that we call a guide to preferred formats. And later we found out that our intentions were very much the same. So with this tool, which is really a website, so it's not an Excel file, but a website, with this tool, we had the intention to share our file format policies so that other repositories in the community can benefit from it. So very much the same sort of intention, but we just ended in a different format, really. And we think it's really nice that we have been given the opportunity in this website or webinar to present our tool and to discuss whether, in what ways there are similarities or differences and how we can work together to make it better for all of you. So there's a link in this sheet. It's still in Dutch, as you can see. Wegwijzer voorkeursformaten. Well, it says guide to preferred formats in Dutch. And when I click on it, I get to a summary in English, because the whole website still is in Dutch. Can you go to the next one, Sam? Because I like to show or point out that the tool consists really of 3 parts. There is an institution page, where as an institution, likewise in the Excel sheet, you can document your own file format policy. So all the file formats that you think or that are preferred or accepted within your repository. There is also a very big registry of file formats. So you can browse through about 1900 different file formats. And we have worked hard in giving them some sort of order, so you can browse through them very easily. And there's a step-by-step plan. And this step-by-step plan, I think it is very similar to what Asbjørn just said about that as an organization, you must have your own file format framework or policy framework, and that can be very different for each institute. And what we tried to do in this guide was help institutes to also define these kinds of frameworks, to help them by asking some questions and then in the end making it possible to make a decision on let's say a well-informed decision. Yes, let's go to the next one then. So what is in this guide? We're looking at a mock-up right now about a specific file format. It's an example, of course, and we translated it to English. So for each of these 1900 file formats, you will see some sort of description. We ordered the file formats, as I said, in format families and also in application domains, like this PDF format belongs to the format family PDF, and this is application domain text. And also you see links to other registries. So we think it's very important not to describe everything ourselves, but to make use of descriptions and definitions that are already there about the same file format. So that's why we link to these other registries. And below, I hope you can see it because in my screen it's behind my own picture. You see the institutes named that use this particular file format in their policy. So here we see that this PDF is an accepted file format at DANS. And DANS again is a scientific repository in the Netherlands. And you see that Stadsarchief Amsterdam, which is the local archive of the city of Amsterdam, does have this PDF file format in its archive, even though it's not preferred or accepted. And then we call it its kind of legacy. So if you want to know what other file formats, for instance, Stadsarchief Amsterdam has in its policy, you just click on Stadsarchief Amsterdam and you will get to its institution page where you can see the complete list. But the website is sort of you can navigate from file formats to institutions and back to find out what other institutions have these file formats and also what other file formats are there. Okay, I have a next slide which tells a little bit more about this step-by-step plan. So we try to give some guidance in how to formulate or to create a file format policy or to choose the file formats for your organization. And on the right, you see some sort of plot. So it's an X and Y X, and all the dots, all the dots represent a particular file format. So for instance, the dot completely right upper is the broadcast wave to generic. And the position of these dots is defined by two things. One is the importance of the file format family to the particular organization. And this is very interesting because we tried to define what perspectives are relevant to take into account when choosing particular file formats. And these perspectives are that you look at your users. So what does your community ask? The second one is your own systems. What is supported, what file formats are supported by your systems and maybe are not supported. Then the producers, because they will perhaps make use of new file formats that you did not know yet, but it may be important for you to accommodate your producers the best you can, or maybe you have this not only well, maybe you're obliged to do so, depending on your own mission as a repository. And the last perspective that we added was your strategy as a repository. So you might think about specific file formats that are not so popular yet, but you expect them to become popular, so you already add them to your policy. So these four perspectives together, they define some sort of weight to the format families. And on the other X, you see the word sustainability. And where the importance is very much subjective for each repository, the sustainability more or less is more an objective or neutral fact that we try to gather information about because for each and every institute, it's important that, for instance, about the file format, it's open, or there is transparency about the file format, or it is well used or popular within the archives, and all sorts of aspects that you can measure add up to some sort of sustainability. And in the actual sustainability score, we made use of the NARA matrix, sustainability matrix that NARA, the American National Archive Records Administration, published, because we found out that that was a very broad tool in gathering all these sustainability factors, and a really nice way of adding them up to a single score. So for all the 1900 file formats, we made a connection with the NARA schema. And so you can see, for instance, for these formats at the left, like Apple ProRes, Broadcast Wave, etc., we also present the sustainability score if it's available. And those scores define the position on the X, the X-axis, X-axis, yeah. So the horizontal, and so this kind of plot helps you in thinking about what are the possible formats or file format families that you want to choose from, and how do they have a position within this plot. And you're not obliged to choose the one that is in the upper right position, of course, but it helps you to think about this as a policy. Okay, we'll go to my last sheet, because I just wanted to show you this schema to not to impress, but to stress the point that we tried to create a semantic web or make use of semantic web technology, and that with the linked or the IDs, we really link to the external repositories like Wikidata and Pronom, but also to Copter as a way to retrieve even more information about the particular file format, to make a more informed decision about your file format policies. So this is all about the technique and what the tool offers or tries to offer to you as a repository. And I'll be happy to give the word to Sam to follow up.
Thank you, Marjolein. One of the other goals of the website was community building. We want to give a tool to the users to create a community around format policies. We do this by providing a tool for knowledge sharing. Like you saw, there is a lot of information about file formats through the integrations that Marjolein talked about a few minutes ago. And that information helps institutions to understand the file format and to choose a file format. And they also can create their format policies and create decisions about the format policies. And that way we want to give a tool that people can use to make decisions about format policy. And then another important reason in community building is helping each other. We give information about an institution that has a certain format in their format policy, or we show a format policy of a specific institution. So people can see what other institutions are doing and what preferred format they chose, for example. Also, you can use it, for example, if you are a same institution, to look into what other institutions have. In Dutch, we say it's better well stolen than badly invented. I don't know if that's proper English, but it's better to look at other institutions and see what they have, and maybe that will inspire you to create your format policies. And yeah, this is also something that we try to support in our tool. And this is something we do by providing an overview of the format policies. On this slide, you see some screenshot of on the left side, you see preferred formats. For example, PDF, which of the institutions has preferred format of PDF, for example. Then you can see if that institution has this format in their collection and has that in their format policy. You can ask questions, but because on the right side at the top, you see contact information that we also add to our site, so people can come in contact with the person who created the format policy, and so they can ask questions. Something you also see on the institution page is which preferred format somebody or some institution selected and has publicized on our website. So these are tools that we give people so that they can start sharing knowledge. And also what Marjolein talked about was the integration with Copter, Pronom, and Wikidata. And here you see screenshots from our website where you see the integration with Copter, for example, on the left side, where we give tools that from the Copter website that support a specific format. In this example, it's GIF. In the middle, it's the Pronom information that we give, and on the right side you see the Wikidata information. And well, with this information about a file format, people can decide if it's a good format to keep in their policy, yes or no. And that's also what we want to facilitate more and more if we can. Another part is the expert group, that the group that manages the website. But we also want to participate in the knowledge sharing and knowledge building, because we don't have every question, of course, but of every answer, of course, still want to answer the questions of the community, or we will connect different institutions if we cannot, for example, answer the question ourselves. We can see which institution has more information, or we expect has more information about for that institution, or follow the international events, like we are part of the OPF interest group, like you see, and we also follow the events that happen more broadly, and we hope also to give advice to participants of our website. So then some advantages that we see in our tool. We give institutions control over filling in their own policies. We are not going to input the information ourselves. They can just ask for an account and create their policy on the website. Another advantage is that we try to reuse knowledge as much as possible, and you reuse existing data set as much as possible. That's what we did. That we showed already some examples of using Pronom, of using Nara, of using Copter, and that helps us a lot to build the website and provide as much as information as possible. We also are thinking about other integrations, like, for example, the PAR initiative, Reservation Action Registry. Last week, there was an OPF webinar about PAR, and we already got some really interesting ideas about how we could improve our website using PAR. Not that we are going to do it immediately, because we need to have time and so on, but we are still thinking about how we could use this to improve our website and to make it more useful for the website users. And then some disadvantages, because it's not all perfect, of course. Yeah, it takes effort to add a policy. You have to convince institutions to use our website. And with the lockdown and Corona, it was not very easy to convince people and give webinars on this topic. It's something that you need to use hands-on and get experience in using. So that's something that we hope to do in the future, that we can do some workshops so we can convince people to easily use the website. We, of course, it's a system. We use Semantic Media Wiki. So that's a technology that we also need to maintain, for example. Also, the data sources that we use, we also have to load them into the system. So that makes it a little bit more work to maintain. And another limitation is because we choose to reuse as much as information as possible. It's also a limitation, of course, because not all the sources have all the information that you want. For example, we use Pronom, but Pronom, of course, doesn't have all the formats, although they are doing their best right now. There are lots of formats being added, but still it's a limited number. So we are limited, for example, by something like that. Or the integrations between the different data sets are not always perfect, so you cannot have all the information for all the file formats that you want. But still, it's a good idea, I think, to do the data integration. But it's yeah, it's a lot of work. You don't have to underestimate that. And still some future development. like we said, it's only in Dutch right now, but we want to translate it so it can be improved in the future with international collaboration. And like we said, we would like to work with the file format working group of OPF, for example. So that means that we have to probably translate the website. And also we want to deliver back the improvement that we make on the data sources, because if you import data and you see mistakes that you fix, you also have to contribute them back. So you don't have to keep fixing the improvements that you did. So that's also something we want to work on. And that was our presentation. Over to the question.
Thank you to all the speakers. That was a really brilliant presentation. I mean, I personally really appreciate the ICRFF meetings. We see the most interesting and wonderful things stemming from them. So I fully encourage, everyone to get involved in whatever capacities they can. I believe that all the relevant information and links have been shared in the chat, but please do pop a note in or get back in touch if you'd like to see anything again. So yeah, if there's any further questions, you can type them into the chat box or raise your hand and we'll enable your microphone and your camera. Okay, I think Hannah Smith has said, are there any recommendations on how regularly repositories should review their accepted file format lists?
I can start out with trying to give an answer to that. So that is not something that we are working with in our file format group right now. We want to, in the new year, we want to create a new deliverable. It's something that's been on my mind for a while. That is how to do proper preservation watch. And that's basically, that feeds into your question, because you need to know when you should initiate a file format analysis. So you need a framework to analyze a file format, and then you need to know when you should begin that analysis. And we want to create a guideline here in the beginning of the new year for what is some good considerations to make when you should initiate this analysis. And what we do in my organization right now is that we want to have a yearly meeting where we evaluate our file formats. That's what we are doing currently. But this is something that I want to collaborate or use this new file format group on. So I want to hear from the other participants there. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? How to review your file format policies. So it's a very good question. Thank you.
Can I add something, Asbjørn?
Yes.
I think what you say is totally correct. So it's all about this sustainability factors. When they change, then that might be a trigger for you to redefine your policy or look for alternatives. But also there might be other changes in that on the other X, as I explained, that might change, like users come with new file formats or new questions. And also, well, on all these factors, that there might be developments that urge you to change your policy or redefine it.
And if I can add something as well, at the Dutch Digital Heritage Network, we also just started the Preservation Watch working group. That's another working group that I'm part of, and Marjolein also. A coincidence. And there we are doing research on trying to predict when file format will be obsolete or will become obsolete. So we use the bus model, bus diffusion model for that. And we created already 2 blog posts about what we are working on. They are unfortunately again in Dutch, but maybe you can translate them.
We should switch some to English in all our work.
Yeah. This week or next week, the third blog post will come out with an analysis of the sound and vision data. So that's maybe something that will come later as well. We can do a webinar about.
I believe there was a question that came through, but it just went to the hosts and panelists. So I'll read it out there. It's from Ingeborg. Forgive me if I've pronounced your name wrong. And the question is, what is the current status of the new Dutch method usage by Dutch institutions?
Do you know, Marjolein, we did some counts in September, but I don't know them by heart.
No,
something
I think
like
that
10 or
there were,
20.
Something like that. And especially at the beginning, there were quite a few that were interested, and we had a lot of exposure via webinars, etc. But then we found out, that was one of the points that Sam made also, that you really have to make yourself known. And maybe some institutes are sort of hesitant to go over this step through this door. Don't know how to say it, but to make the effort indeed to publish also their policies. I think there is a lot of institutions that use our website just to get information, but sharing the policy sometimes is, people are more hesitant on that. Is that an answer?
I believe so. We've got a question from Paul in the chat. I'd also be happy if Paul wanted to hop on the microphone and ask this one, but if not, I'll read it out on his behalf. So Paul's from DPC, and he said it's great to bring together this information in one place, but he's surprised by how many organizations have long lists of unacceptable file formats. It's one thing to recommend preferred formats. Oh, disappeared there. It's one thing to recommend preferred formats, but if an archive has an unacceptable format, it's concerning. In this case, data in an unacceptable format will either not be preserved, or the depositor will migrate an accepted file format, most likely without any validation, documentation, or typical digital preservation processes. And from what we know about migration, it will most likely result in damaging the data. Surely this is contrary to accepted digital preservation good practice.
Yeah.
So can you tell something about this knowledge?
Because we at the KB we don't use preferred format. The website is called preferred format, but we support more than preferred formats. We have what we, if we translate it, is knowledge level. There we say how much knowledge we have about a specific format, and the website on preferred format is also capable of using that knowledge level way of showing the information. So there you can, and we don't like preferred formats as well as a term, because we just accept everything as our policy in the KB, and but we know we don't know that we cannot do everything for all the files that we get at the KB right now. So we have some specific knowledge, for example, about JPEG 2000, because Johan van der Kneef develops JPEGizer for OPF. And yeah, so we have a lot of information and lots of knowledge about JPEG 2000. So there we say that we have we know a lot about JPEG 2000, and that's a format, for example, that we support and we can validate and things like that. But there are other formats, some really dark research format that we don't have much knowledge about, or that is not that we cannot identify, we communicate that we don't know much about it yet and that we just store it. It's a way of communicating about what we know about file formats, what the status is of some file formats at the KB. And we of course want to grow that list, and we want to know every format in the end, but we have more than 1,000 file format types, so file format. So it will take a while, I guess, to know them all. So that's why we use this way of communicating instead of saying what is preferred of unacceptable or whatever term you use for that. And that's why we use knowledge levels.
Yes, and in the part of the website that is called a step-by-step, we try to give these nuances also. So it's not black and white, either preferred, non-preferred, but there are many nuances, also depending on your mission or your role in your own field.
So I also want to make a comment. I think that's a very difficult and complicated question you're raising, and I don't think necessarily there's one approach to doing digital preservation. I think there's many approaches, and I think it depends on you formalizing and verbalizing your own strategy. So you need to be aware of what is your strategy, write that down, and then you need to follow your strategy. And then there's many ways of completing your goal. And your goal is, or should be, to maintain access to data on the long term. And I am kind of in a precarious situation because unfortunately my organization has a very restrictive list on what we accept for file formats. We say it's a very narrow list of file formats that we accept. So data should not be lost, but data should be migrated to any file format on this list. And I don't necessarily agree fully with this way of dealing with it, but this is how there's a strong sentiment in my organization that we provide the best possible probability that we can access this data in the long term with the lowest cost with the lowest cost ratio. And so that's my situation. I think that there's many ways of doing this. So that's my take on it.
Amazing, thank you. We've got I think one question and one comment in the chat, and we might have to do this quite quickly, just noticing the time. So Jan Seidorf has asked, has there been any work done regarding creating mechanisms and processes for protecting archival materials from institutional obsolescence? How to ensure your organization can read all formats that it has?
I missed the beginning, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Has there been any work done regarding creating mechanisms and processes for protecting archival materials from institutional obsolescence?
I don't understand the question. Do you?
Yeah, that's part of the format policy. That's why you create a format policy, is which are the formats that we have in our organization, and how are we going to migrate them, for example, to another format. And there is, like I said, also the preservation watch component on this. So you want to monitor when it's important to migrate the format that you have, and that's why we also in the guide for preferred format, for example, have a part about importance to the organization, how important is a specific format for your organization, and how can you prioritize that to, for example, migrate it to a new format. If it's an high important for your designated community, for example, then you will make do it quicker than when something is maybe not as important. You would preferably you want to do everything all at once, of course, but that's not possible. You have to prioritize probably, and that's why we created the website and added all these possibilities for you to give you tools to understand this. We also did a copter integration, for example, so you can see which tools can read and write a certain format. So all that information hopefully helps you to support you in that process.
I also think that metadata, technical metadata, is key in this. So you will try to gather as much as possible of the relevant metadata about a file. So not only the file format, but also about the codec and other aspects, because those might be relevant when you try to render the file later. So I think that's very important too, and that's also a field that we would like to work on further in combination with the registries that we are linking to.
Thank you. Ruth made a comment that I think, again, it went to hosts and panelists, so I'll just read this one out quickly. They said, a comment rather than a question. We have an archive connected to an organization, and as part of our digital preservation project, we're establishing preferred file formats for the organization's staff to work in and save content in. So that's how we will be using these resources rather than establishing preferred or accepted file formats for the archive, i.e. content is created in preferred file formats rather than being transferred or migrated or ingested in these formats.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to do, I think.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it depends on the situation of your organization,
Yeah.
what you can actually do or not. So, yeah.
Depends. Yeah.
We just had. Oh, sorry.
I very much agree with that. You know, we are trying to work with a concept called archiving by design. So making sure that data in its life cycle, data has a life cycle going from creation to either deletion or archiving, or long-term preservation, whichever word you want to use. But you really help yourself a lot if you make sure that data are already prepared for archiving or choosing the good file formats from creation. It's, however, very difficult for us as an organization from an archival point of view to have that influence or have that sway over our government agencies that deliver data to us. We don't have that power, but there is, of course, a means and ways to try to influence this process.
Yeah, and that's why, and we also created the preferred format, so you can create your own format policy. Because the most question that we are asked is, what is the preferred format for this? How do what do I need to if I have TIFFs, what do I have to convert it to? Or if I have a TIFF 2000, is that a good format? Yes or no? And then we say, yeah, well, it doesn't work that way. We made a website where you can decide for yourself, for your organization, because that depends on your situation. So, sorry, you have to use our website. We are not going to recommend just the file format to you.
We've just had one last question come through from Alfred, and I think we should probably look at it. They said, I would say long-term does not necessarily include short-term. For example, if there's not a working open source solution to open a file format, but an open standard and a proprietary solution. So you say there will be a solution on the long term, even in case the proprietary solution doesn't work anymore. Is short term meant to, or in case of doubt, excluded and restrict the long term?
Yeah, well, We used, for example, these terms are also part, for example, of the evaluation to see if for example, is there an open source variant available, or is it only an proprietary solution available? So that's part of the evaluation that you
it's
can
part
use
of
in
the
website.
sustainability score.
Yeah.
So all those aspects are relevant, but it's not a yes or no. It's not if it's not open source, then it's a no, or the other way around. So it really depends on the situation, and I'm not sure if you can divide it in long term or short term.
Yeah,
the way you did.
Yeah, it's also important for the organization that if you say we want to include short term and not only long term, yeah, then you can use that in that evaluation. So it's up to you to define what is your format policy and what is important for you.
For you, for your users, etc.
Yeah, yeah. Indeed.
If you have users on the short term, then of course you want to support them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is really nice about the NARA matrix, that it lists all those different aspects. And so you can make a well-informed decision on how you want to balance those aspects, because you might have a different weighing of all these factors. So for you, a specific outcome is different in terms of sustainability than for your neighbor, for instance. So also there might be some subjective choices that you can make yourself. But the nice thing about this matrix, I think, is that all those aspects are sort of, it gives an overview, and you don't get stuck to just a few aspects. No, you take them all into account. I think that's a very good thing to do.
Okay, I think that might be all of our questions for today. It's been brilliant. So a big thank you to our speakers and also to our participants for joining us and for all your input and your questions. The recording and the slides will be available to OPF members shortly. Our next webinar will be at the end of January, so please keep an eye on our events page and on social medias to learn more about all of that when we finalize everything. That's everything from me. If you want any follows up to this, please do just send an email to the info and we can sort the information out for you. So thank you very much and bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.